All right. Can you hear me? Great. Okay, let me just check how long we've got now. I think we have an hour now. Is that right? Do we have an hour now? Okay, great. So until, well, 1 o'clock where you are. Great. So before we continue, let's just revive our motivation. Most important to not lose that, to take a moment to reflect on why we're studying the 12 links, not just for our own benefit, but may this become a cause for us to become fully enlightened so that we are of greatest benefit to all sentient beings. Okay. Now I received a question from Varda, but I wasn't able to open it yet. Somehow my phone doesn't allow me to get to it. It wants me to update something first. So maybe if you could just post it. Yeah, right now, no, it's not working. I'll try one more time, but for some reason, yeah, I cannot open this app. I need to update something and that would take too long. Oh, now I got it. Okay. No, again, it's gone. Sorry, I cannot do it. So you need to resend it, please. Maybe post it to the side of this. I can't open it right now, Varda. Okay. Going back to ignorance. Well, then of course having understood there's so many different types, not knowing, being diametrically opposed to what's actually there, and then there's innate ignorance, or innate misapprehensions, there are intellectually acquired ones, there are superficial kind of misperceptions with regard to anything, with regard to phenomena other than emptiness. But the root of all those is, of course, the misapprehension that perceives anything, myself or other phenomena, perceives that to exist in and of itself as inherently existent. And how that is a wrong perception, well, and how it gives rise to all the other misperceptions, of course, we need to get into that. We don't have that much time, but just to say a few words about it. So with regard to, first of all, how is that a misapprehension? Well, if the way things appear to that particular misapprehension, in other words, inherent existence, if that really existed, if phenomena really existed that way, if we analyze them, if we looked for this mode of existence that this misapprehension suggests there to be, we should be able to find it. Now, taking, for instance, the I, I've already mentioned dependence on causes and conditions. Okay, now the I, of course, me as a person, if you think of yourself, consider yourself, well, you yourself appear to yourself as a solid, there seems to be a solid I that is more concrete than the conventional I, the merely labeled I, and I'll get to this. There's a sense there's a true I, and that I covers all of my mind and my body. It covers all of it, because otherwise, if someone poked me in the knee or poked me in on my shoulder or whatever, kind of, it wouldn't have a sense I was poked or I was touched. So somehow this I seems to pervade everything, mind and body, and is not the same as mind and body. It's there very concretely. And anything that has to do, that relates to mind and body, so someone looks at me, looks at my body, there's a sense they look at me. If my mind engages in any kind of activity, there's a sense I engage in this activity. So on top of the mind meditating, there's a sense there's also an I meditating. And in fact, when I say I meditate, it's almost like the I is controlling the meditating mind. We kind of move away from understanding really what's meditating, what is mindful is the mind itself. But no, there's a sense there's an I that's meditating and controlling the mind. So anyway, there's an I that's sick. When I got a headache, the I on top of the head hurting, there's a sense there's an I that also hurts. Okay. When someone uses insulting words, then there's a sense I've been hurt. My reputation, my whatever, something has been hurt here, and the I definitely has been hurt, and in that way also possibly my reputation, etc. Now, if you really observe this, it's very clear that that takes place, that there is an I that is affected when our mind and body are affected. So therefore, it must cover all of mind and body. And it seems pretty concrete at times, very, very concrete, very, very solidly there, especially when there's strong emotional response, when there's strong embarrassment, strong hatred, strong happiness too. At moments of really strong happiness, there's a very strong hands. Or being praised, for instance. So any kind of afflictive response in particular. So when there's attachment, when there's craving, because they support these afflictive emotions, they were created by this misapprehension, but they also support, they reinforce this misapprehension. And oftentimes when these afflictive emotions are there, then when they're there, so what happens is that there is this misapprehension is also present when these afflictive emotions, when there's attachment, when there's anger, these afflictive emotions are there, then also this sense they exist inherently, this harm, etc., this other person exists inherently, it's present there at the same time. Some say it's the mind itself that is the afflictive emotions, and others argue no, there's another mind that arises at the same time. Anyway, whichever it is, but there's a strong sense of a separate I. Now, if this I really existed the way it appears to us, we should be able to find it. It would be just as simple as looking for it, and it should become clearer. And we engage in different analysis on it, and the more we look for it, the less it appears. And that, of course, suggests that it doesn't exist the way it appears. And of course, when we wonder how does it exist? So what makes up the I? If we think of, well, who am I as a person? I have a very strong sense. For instance, if I'm very proud of my achievements, I'm totally ignoring the fact that my achievements are the result of many causes and conditions in the past. And of course, it's mainly the mind that was able to achieve what it achieved, but there are other factors that were also part of this achievement. Without other people, without others' inputs, it would have been impossible. So I need to also appreciate others' kind of input, but the arrogance suggests just the I. And then also with regard to, so that's dependence on causes and conditions. Understanding that allows me to better understand, well, arrogance and pride. I mean, this afflictive pride, not self-confidence, but afflictive kind of exaggerated sense of my self-importance and of my own qualities. Well, if I think of all the causes and conditions that gave rise to my achievements, or other people who were involved, then that kind of extreme sense of just focusing on myself, that disappears. Now, with regard, that's the first type of dependence on causes and conditions. Then there's dependence on parts, that whatever exists, so me as a person, not only am I the result of causes and conditions, and mainly my mind of the past creating me right now, but also in terms of, and I could also, if I have great anger towards my parents, having a sense my parents messed me up. So one was arrogance, considering other causes and conditions. But also when I have a sense of my parents, they messed me up. I'm really frustrated, for instance, with my mother. She's done everything wrong, etc. Well, understanding the person who's made the mistakes is no longer around. This person is no longer the same, may still make similar mistakes, but to just understand that cause is no longer there in that way. Secondly, my mind is the main cause, and therefore I created the causes and conditions to have a mother like that and to find myself in a situation like that. And in that way, I'm not that kind of paralyzed victim, as in, like, I can't do anything about it, because at least I can work with my own mind to let go of the hurt, let go of whatever it's created in my mind, because I also need to understand that whatever another person has done to me, it is my mind that interprets the situation and chooses to believe it or not to believe it, what I've been said, etc. In the end, it's my own thoughts that do something with whatever another person has done to me. If there is no thought reflecting on what the other person has done, then there is no effect. So only if my mental consciousness does something what another person has done to me, only then can it actually affect me. So it's an interpretation of the mind, and that is my own mind again. So it's all in my own hand to allow myself to be hurt or not. Of course, in the past I didn't have that choice, but now I've learned about it and I can let go. So in that sense, again, causes and conditions, it was my own mind that also created the situation, and my own mind can now take that and reflect upon it in such a way that it creates a moment later a sense in which I can let go of the situation. So then hatred is not possible. That is in terms of cause and effect. And those are just examples, or dependence on causes and conditions. Dependence on parts. How does that help me? Well, I'm not the body. I'm not the mind. I'm made of many, many different parts. And so are other people for that matter anyway. I mean, also in terms of my hatred towards another person, I forgot to mention, of course, cause and effect. If I go back to dependence on causes and conditions, the other person who I hate for their behavior, well, they're also the result of causes and conditions. They were also conditioned by their own parents. They were also conditioned by what they went through, etc. And just as they are not able to interpret the situation by using their mind in an effective way, just as I wasn't, they were not able to do that. And again, it helps us, just dependence on causes and conditions helps us to deal with arrogance, with frustration, with hatred, and so forth. Okay. But then dependence on parts. I myself am not my body. It's a part of me. I'm not my anger. It's a part of me. So I'm not anger. I may identify with negative states of mind, like seeing them as one with myself, but no, those are part of me. I'm the whole that has parts. And we can't say that the whole is the parts. Again, that doesn't work. So to become aware of that, think of any kind of problem you have with yourself. First, we need to, of course, identify what's the issue. Do I identify with my body? Do I identify with certain states of mind, with failure or whatever I, call it? Um, d- Again, understanding that's just a part. I'm not all of that. I'm so much more. And likewise, another person, same thing. We take one aspect and believe that aspect to be that person. No, a person is much more complicated than that. So, in that way, that already helps us a lot. But the deepest level to get a better understanding and understand in that way that the misapprehension of reality is truly that, a misapprehension that believes things to be concrete and independent where actually they're not concrete, they're merely labeled. Well, is the understanding of dependent arising. And on the deepest level, it's dependence on labeling. So not only am I as a person, other people, and our trouble is mainly with other people and ourselves. Well, a result of causes and conditions is made of different parts, different states of mind, different qualities, positive and negative ones, and of course a body that's very complicated. But on top of that, it's the other person, is merely labeled, is merely named on the basis of mind and body. So when the body does something, we label the I does that. It's just based on this on the functions of the body and the mind. We label I. So anything in connection to mind and body, we label that I on the basis of that. So the body does something, I say I do. I meditate, I run. And there is no I other than parts of mind and body that perform these functions. When I say someone looks at me, it's actually just saying looking at a part of my body, the front of my body, and labeled on that part of the body. In that moment, I label I. And I label, depending on the situation, I label it differently. So just chosen based on mind and body, I've labeled, well, I. And that's it. There is no overarching self. It's like initially when someone pokes me, I label, yeah, they poked I on the basis of my arm that was poked in that moment or that was touched in that moment. But then it seems a moment later, what it seems that there is not just the arm that was poked, and based on that, I label I was poked, but there seems to be a separate basis now, a separate I that was also touched, that was also touched by this person or poked by this person or whatever, right? And that is where we that's where we go wrong. That is the problem. And how that lies at the root of all our misapprehensions, well, here we need to take the next step. But first, to understand dependence in the way I just described, and that's of course not enough. And we'll do a meditation on it. It's not enough though. But this is the aspect that is most important. So we'll do in a moment, we'll do a meditation just on dependent arising, as I just described it. And then the next step I want to go through is how this misapprehension leads to, well, possibly other misapprehensions, but even more importantly, leads to emotional responses such as mainly anger and attachment. And that in turn leads to other responses such as, well, actions of body, speech, and mind. That process needs to be explained. And then the rest, provide you a little bit more detail of what we did last time, but we've basically gone through the other steps. And the main understanding really needs to lie with the first three links: ignorance, um, formative actions, and then consciousness as the basis of these actions or the residues of those. So now let's do a short meditation on dependent arising with regard to the I. We can do it with regard to other things, but with regard to the I, and I'll briefly mention also other people, because of course, most our troubles are in relation to other people. Okay, so let's focus on the breathing for a few moments before we start the meditation. And now let's take a moment to be aware of our own self. Get a sense of I, the I that is sitting here and meditates. Is there a sense of something very concrete, at times more noticeable than at other times, but nonetheless a sense of an I that pervades mind and body? It appears to exist independently. It's just there, in other words. Doesn't require anything for it to exist, as long as there is a mind and a body. And even then, it seems it could exist even without them. And the same seems to be the case for other people, except they're not I, but they're truly others. Now, think of situations where there was a sense of arrogance due to some achievement or some ability. Well, that is a case where we are not aware of the dependence on causes and conditions. So instead of just being proud of ourselves, we should be proud of all the other factors, external factors, other people that were necessary to bring about the result that we were proud of, that we felt arrogant about. And then take your frustration with another person, anger or aversion you experience due to some injustice that they've done to you, or some hurt that they caused you. And become aware that of all the different causes, this person was one condition to cause this pain. But the main cause was the karmic action that was created by a formal continuum of your own mind. Created by our own misapprehension of reality. Which was also the main cause for this other person's behavior. Their inability to see things the way they exist. And not only is the conventional I dependent on a diversity of causes and conditions, but it's also made of numerous parts. So if we experience moments of self-hatred, or frustration with your own ability or inability to do something, think again. Since you're much more than whatever aspect you don't like about yourself. And of course, it was created by a misapprehension of reality, giving rise to that inability. And there's so many good qualities you possess. then again, if you're experiencing arrogance about certain qualities you have, remember that you also have negative attributes that prevent you from being able to do certain things. So that it doesn't make sense to identify strongly with a positive quality or an achievement. But not only are you dependent on causes and conditions and on parts that are not you, but you're also just labeled. In that there is no intrinsic I that covers mind and body. There is no innate I other than the I that is merely labeled on the basis of mind or body. So when a particular consciousness meditates, we label I meditate. And when certain parts of the body move in a way that allows us to walk, we say, I walk. With the I being merely labeled on whichever body part is activated in the process of walking. Therefore, since the I exists in such a dependent way, it is impossible for it to exist in the over concrete way, independent way that appears to our own misperception or misapprehension of reality. So now to conclude this analysis, spend some time to single-pointedly focus on whatever insight you've gained. And allow this to sink deeper and become a greater part of your mind. Okay, then slowly arise from the meditation. Okay. Now, having spent some time understanding the basic misapprehension of reality, which is seen as the root, now, of course, getting a sense of how that is indeed a misapprehension that's opposed to what's actually there, apprehending an intrinsic kind of mode of an I that doesn't exist, or an intrinsic kind of sense of a concrete, very solid other person, other phenomena. Well, then what's important to understand is how we get from that misapprehension. Well, of course, part of that is also recognizing how deeply ingrained it is in our mind, how in every situation, so while we're of course meditating, listening to the Dharma, it's less pronounced, but in every situation, it's actually ever present, and then gives rise to other emotions, again, based on a misapprehension, and in turn, of course, lead to actions of body, speech, and mind. Of course, it's important to understand that not all our actions are samsaric actions, because depending on our motivation, we may actually engage in actions that become a cause for liberation and not for samsaric experiences. That is possible depending on how strong we have the mind of enlightenment or renunciation, the wish to be free from our samsaric experiences. It's all dependent on the mind. But in our day-to-day life, unless we really make an effort to generate bodhicitta, then our actions can actually become the causes for experiences that are not typically samsaric. But unless we have those, our experiences are very much determined by this misapprehension, giving rise automatically to other types of mind, and then, of course, creating future experiences. Now, here, the future experiences we're mainly interested in is future experiences, not just in this lifetime, but of course in future lifetimes. Why? As I said earlier on, of course, this life is pretty insignificant. To us, it seems all there is. It's all there's important. But of course, if there's so many lives lying ahead, we want to be prepared for those. We want to make changes now that, of course, benefit us right now. That's the good thing about these changes. They benefit us right away, but also in the long term. And for that, it's important to understand what this misapprehension, what it actually can do to us. Now, to explain that process, first, there's this basic misapprehension that over concretizes or sees phenomena as more concrete as they are, more solid than they are. as if we perceive things the way we do because they already exist that way and not because we've labeled them that way. That then leads to, of course, the fact that we perceive things all around us all the time. We make contact with other people and we misperceive ourselves, we misperceive other things the way described. And then we perceive other things, we make contact with things in a certain situation with this underlying misapprehension, and a feeling arises. Feeling is very important. That's why it's mentioned as part of the 12 links. In every situation, there is a feeling, and our lives are driven by a feeling. Also, when we talk about the 5 aggregates, and we will a little bit later as part of the 4th link of name and form, well, feeling is described separately. That's one of the reasons, because it's everything in our life, we are driven by feelings. In particular, in this realm of existence we're in right now, which is described as the desire realm. Okay, so this feeling, what is it? It's either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. The neutral feeling is not much of an issue. It's neutral. It's neither positive nor negative. It can in turn lead to boredom, basically, because it's just neutral, and we crave pleasant feelings. Pleasant feelings. The moment there's a pleasant feeling, our mind is attached. The degree of attachment is such that we probably don't notice, but it's right away, our mind is right away attached. Anyway, that being the case, what happens is, of course, this feeling of pleasant, like let's say there's a really pleasant experience, another person, you talk to someone and they make you feel a way that you really desire. There's like it just touches something within you. You feel recognized, you feel understood, whatever it is. So now what happens is the mind now labels on the basis of the way you feel, actually just labels pleasant on the other person. But a moment later, this pleasantness seems to be within the person. Right away, there's a response. Now what happens is, first you exaggerate that positiveness in that person. The mind, because it's already labeled pleasant, you've not labeled anything else. You've just labeled pleasant person, pleasant object. And because that's all you've labeled, you've not labeled, well, they have negative qualities, they're just a human being, etc. That doesn't happen because of the way it makes you feel. The better you feel, the more you just label pleasant, and there's a sense this person is not just labeled as pleasant, this pleasantness that was experienced with your own mind seems to be seated in that person, seems to be part of that person, makes up the whole person. So your mind exaggerates the positive aspect of that person, not being able to see the whole picture. And then you want it. Attachment arises. Only after the exaggeration, you want it. You don't want to be separated from this object. So you see how this sense of wanting this other person comes about because of not apprehending, not understanding that this pleasantness doesn't lie within the person, having just labeled it on the basis of how I feel, then believing it to be truly there, exaggerating that pleasantness, not being able to see that there's more to that person, and then wanting it. But that is only possible. Why? Because first of all, it starts with the I. It starts with the I. Now, I've already talked about the response to other things, but it all starts before that. In that, initially, the mind perceives of I versus others. In that, there's an awareness of physical happenings in the body and mental happenings, mental events. And becoming aware of that, the mind automatically labels I on the basis of mind and body that are connected. They are connected. There's no doubt about it. It's not like my mind kind of goes out of my body. I mean, in this life, I'm just talking about the first time this labeling took place in this lifetime. when we were little children. It took place when we possibly in the womb. I mean, we don't remember now being in the womb, and it's already took place in the previous life, but that we certainly don't remember. And anyway, it was with a different body at that time. But in this life, at some point, there was an identification. The mind and the body are connected, no doubt. But based on that, there was a sense, okay, those two being connected, then there's an I. The mind just automatically labeled I, and a moment later, due to our habituation, believe there to be a true I, not just labeled. There's a sense, oh, I just refer to myself as I, and I'm saying there's just a sense of it. We don't really think like that intellectually, but there's a sense that I only call it an I because there is an I, although it's the other way around. We perceive of an I because we labeled it on the basis of mind and body. However, due to our habit, we hold on to there's something concretely there. But we don't stop there. Now there's a distinction between I and everything else. So now that distinction is also not just labeled on the basis of there's an I and body here. I call this I and the rest other. No, it seems to be truly there. It's not just that I've labeled this on the basis of this mind, this body, and this mind and that. No, it seems there's truly this entity called others. Okay. And then what happens also is I now exaggerate the importance of this I, because this is closer to the mind labeling. Okay, the mind that's labeled is now perceiving the I to be inherently there and perceiving this I to be closer to the mind than other phenomena being closer to this mind. Therefore, I exaggerate its importance. Its value, which then leads to attachment to this importance, to this value, attachment to I and mine. I exaggerate the importance on the value of I and mine, and that leads then to attachment to I and mine. And that is called self-centeredness. That attachment is also called self-centeredness. So how do we get there? To repeat, first I labeled I, and then I perceive this I to be truly there. I label other, and I perceive others to be truly there. And then, because of the closeness of this I, and which is mine, I then exaggerate the importance and the value of this I and mine. And with this exaggeration, once I've exaggerated its importance, whatever positive qualities, in this case, usually importance and value, I am attached to I and mine. And now this self-centeredness, which is an attachment to I and mine, that starts to determine everything I do. Everything I do. It's the center of my life. It becomes the driving force in my life, attachment to I and mine. And with regard to what I said earlier on, there's a pleasant object, there's pleasure, is my pleasure. Now I label the pleasure on the other person. This is a pleasant person, but I don't realize that I'm labeling it on the basis of a mind and body of this person, which triggers a certain emotional response within me. I'm not aware that I'm actually just labeling that. No, I perceive this inherent giving me pleasure in that other person. And I'm expecting that to be there. I'm actually labeling a permanence on the other person. This is where permanence, it may trigger pleasure in me now, and this may go on for a week or a year, but maybe in 2 years' time, I've changed, this person has changed, and it no longer triggers that in me. But my expectation is it'll be there. It'll trigger that within me. This person is intrinsically pleasant. I exaggerate this pleasantness in that I can't see anything else. The stronger this pleasure is, the stronger my sense that's all there is. And I crave it. I want it. I believe this happiness, this pleasant, but it was actually not the real pleasure we can experience if there was no self-grasping. It's a kind of just a limited sense of an absence of a boredom or whatever, but we don't realize that. We perceive that as real happiness, and we believe this happiness to be in the other person, and therefore we crave it. We want it. We want to control the other person. This is how the degree of attachment, it can lead to a degree such we want to control the other person. And of course, there's fear involved. Fear we may lose the object. Fear that our happiness will, because we see this person as being that which gives us the happiness. So we believe there's no longer any happiness possible unless we were with the other person, right? It all makes sense in terms of our own experience. But go back to, where did it originate? Of course, with the attachment to the I, but in this case also labeling pleasantness onto the other person, believing this other person to give me that which just in that moment I felt pleasant, and I will do it for a few times. I will be pleasure because of the karmic causes I've created in the past. If I hadn't created the karma for that pleasure to be experienced, it wouldn't be there. The other person was a cooperative condition that triggered that within me, yes, but that was not the main cause. And still, instead of being attached to the positive actions that created this pleasure, I'm attached to the other person. I'm looking totally in the wrong direction. Being actually willing now, being possibly willing to engage in negative actions, and in that way creating causes that will not lead to a pleasant experience such as that, but rather to suffering in the future. This is where the confusion goes. So this is different types of confusion, different to the misapprehension, but believing now that which is not in the nature of giving me happiness, believing this attachment, believing having this person, believing that to be giving me happiness. Total confusion. You can see how we're so confused about what we think is of greatest value, what we think brings us happiness, and so forth. And of course, all based on this misapprehension. Now it goes on, it goes on, it goes further. Now, what about anger and hatred, which is very destructive, even more destructive than attachment? Attachment is not as destructive as anger, but it's still very dangerous because it's underlying. Everything, it's the root of even anger. If we didn't have attachment to the I and mine, we couldn't have anger. So attachment to I and mine, that is really underlying. And that's why it's dangerous. And it's cheeky. It's cheeky because we believe it benefits us. My attachment to this other person, because I believe, because I'm attached to that, I'm getting this happiness that the other person can give me. If I wasn't attached, I wouldn't be getting this happiness. That's how it feels. We believe desire and attachment, they benefit us. Okay. But let's go to anger. Out of the value, out of my attachment, well, first the exaggeration of my own value, my own importance, and that of mine, which includes my happiness. There's attachment to I and mine. And now if you come along and you do something that makes me feel miserable, again, I'm not aware that the actual reason for me feeling miserable in that situation, that in fact, if you insult me, that's a result of insulting someone else. Well, no, I give you are the only cause. You, this other person, is the only cause for my trouble. Okay? Dependence on causes and conditions, out of the window. Next step, I exaggerate. Okay, so already, where's my dependence on the three types of dependences? That you are merely labeled? No way. You're truly this other, and I'm truly this here, not labeled, truly. Secondly, if you insult me, this is not a result of my karma. No, this is your fault, and only your fault. Now, what happens? My mind exaggerates now. My mind starts to exaggerate. It only sees the negativity in you, where dependence on parts, out of the window. You are not a whole that is made of positive and negative qualities. You are just bad. You're only negative. You're only negative. So exaggerate the negativity of you. The exaggeration throws out the dependence on parts. You can only see that aspect. And because I exaggerate that negativity, I now grow angry with you. I'm angry. There's this emotional response. The exaggeration is not the emotional response. It's just a moment of exaggerating, and then there's hatred. I don't like you. I don't want to be around you. Depending on what kind of angry response, there are different versions. It's the one that just wants to be away from you, doesn't want to see you, doesn't want to think of you, or wants to actually go out and harm you, possibly destroy you, because your destruction is the end of my problem. Again, not realizing I labeled problem onto the other person, dependence on how I felt based on my misapprehension, and also not being able to understand that this is the result of my past action. No, I've just labeled that on you, but now I believe you are responsible for my suffering, and if I destroy you, I destroy my problem. My problem is gone. And of course, the same works with attachment, that I believe you give me the happiness that I want. Again, same part of the 12 the three parts of the three types of dependence on causes and conditions. I don't realize that you make me feel good because I created the causes for that. I don't realize this making me feel good, this good quality that I've labeled onto you, which I now believe you have intrinsic in you. I don't see your negative sides. I don't see your negative sides. In fact, I believe from now on, this positiveness is within you. It's deeply within you. And it will always be like that, which is why it's so surprising when one day I realize, wow, this person has negative qualities. So our mind exaggerates, creates a reality with regard to this other person, whether we are attached or we're angry with this person. Depending on the degree of attachment, depending on the degree of anger, well, this is actually preceded by a misapprehension. And the stronger the emotional response, anger or attachment in both cases, in those, well, different cases, depending on that response, this is created by a stronger sense of misapprehension. So the stronger the misapprehension that precedes it, the stronger the emotional response, all arising from feeling that gave rise to this. So can you see, and we'll do a meditation on that, but that's the first thing we do when we come from the break. We need to meditate on that. So hopefully, and now time is up, we've got 2 more minutes left. So hopefully this is clear to some extent. Whatever you've learned, now this you have to bring into your own life. This is one of the most important things to understand in Buddhism. Cause and effect, as I already explained them, but here bringing in the afflictive emotions, bringing in how you get from this misapprehension to totally disregarding dependence with regard to these three aspects: dependence on causes and conditions, on parts and imputation, bringing that in, and as a result, having an emotional response, attachment or anger, which is painful, which is problematic as they arise, but of course giving rise to exaggerated actions which, due to their motivating force, lead to unwanted suffering. Unwanted suffering and everything you don't want to experience, but we constantly experience and we constantly create newly. All right, this we'll have to meditate on in the break. And before we do that, let's make sure we don't lose whatever positive potential we have accumulated right now or in those few hours. Let's not lose it. Let's first of all dedicate it towards our own enlightenment, so that enables us not just to work to our own benefit, but mainly to focus on the welfare of all mother sentient beings, of all sentient beings. Let's dedicate it in that way. And not just that, may all this positive karma, all this virtue we've accumulated also right now benefit other beings, benefit the beings of this world. May those who are sick, like Tali Lubin and all other people who are sick and other people who suffer mentally or physically, may their suffering due to this marriage soon be relieved, be released. May they be able to overcome their problem or their problems. Okay, great. It's 1 minute past 12. I'll see you again. How much time is the break? How long is the break?
1 hour.
Exactly 1 hour. Okay, I'll see you again in 1 hour. And please don't lose what we've talked about. The last part, bring it into your daily life. Whatever you do now, if you've got the chance to reflect on it, do so. And of course, we'll do a meditation on it. Okay, enjoy your break.